Welcome to Drawspace. Drawspace are Australia's only independent artist-run gallery dedicated to contemporary drawing. My name is Melinda, and I'm one of 11 artists on the board who program and curate the space. We curate exhibitions, performances such as Tooth, residencies, workshops, artist talks, and more. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, on whose unceded ancestral lands our RE now stands, and we pay respects to elders past and present, acknowledging them as the traditional custodians of knowledge for these places. So, welcome Nqa and Billy. We had a really well-attended event on Wednesday night with some great feedback. One of the things that I've been very conscious of working with both of you is that there's been a lot of investment, and you've worked really hard to develop this whole idea and to bring this, to a performance.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I just wanted to recognise how hard you both worked on it. So, do you want to talk a little bit about this work? Maybe, I guess you can talk about the practicalities, you can talk about sort of what it means conceptually, but I guess what I'd like to get to is where is it going to go in the next sort of year or two. So, but start off with coming up with this idea and bringing it to fruition.
Well, I just think that the context of Drawspace is great. There's already been so much education for people that come here that they understand that what they're going to see is drawing and that it might be unconventional.
Yeah.
And so
that's true.
That was just so nice to be able to go, okay, I can think about quite formal qualities and people maybe see where I'm coming from. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to look at this and think about line. Mm-hmm. And when you talked about the lighting, when we had our first discussion, I was like, oh yeah, because that would really bring in the shade. And that was nice, but in terms of like looking at quite like formal abstraction and things like this, I have such associations with, like this really patriarchal and authoritarian and also quite conservative like history that is there. And so being able to bring in like, the more organic form of the body for me also allowed me, I guess, to enjoy both parts of it.
Yeah, I certainly got feedback after the night from a couple of people who are artists who commented particularly on this contrast between your body as a soft thing and this hard sort of structure. They were really struck by that. And a few people also mentioned the interaction with the shadow. And your awareness of that on the wall and how you respond to that. It's almost like it's a fellow performer to some extent. That's how they remarked, that's how they described it.
And it's real, like my body is soft and that still really does hurt. And both, I guess, just like, accidents did happen as well, which were interesting. Like
in the lead up.
Can
I say not on the night?
But on the night, you'll see that I am double checking. I'm making sure that I know where everything is, that I'm extremely aware of my space, and I think that comes across in a way that I'm quite comfortable with being at showing like my bodily vulnerability and showing that this is all real in a way. And like a lot of I think what ties this with my whole output and practice is I like looking or like taking uncertainty and instability and the feeling of like precariousness and how that manifests in the everyday. And so I was comfortable with that uncertainty coming off, even in a work where I want to be making big and fluid gestures as well. So I think what was really nice about choreographing it was that I have backgrounds in different sort of movement-based activities, from like yoga, pole dancing, gymnastics a little bit, and so being able to think about what I could take from each of these disciplines that were giving me the shapes that I was interested in and that I have in my other works too, which I find recognisable and part of my style, and then how to really put them together.
So I think people were acutely aware of your moving body as a form of drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was readily understood,
Mm.
which I found good because it is hard to explain, and as a visual artist, I do find it much easier to show than to
Yeah, of
sometimes
course.
explain.
Yeah.
And I did feel that everyone on the night really understood it as such. Yeah. I did some things with with what I was wearing as well to maybe abstract the body as well.
Mhm.
And I guess I wanted to get rid of as many distractions as I could so that people would be able to enjoy the lines and the
Yeah.
shapes of it. One of the things I did was I've grown out my fringe so
Mhm.
that my hair would move together and cover my face up so that there was less of that agency. And it is a challenge with the pole not to have skin, but I felt that would be distracting. So I went through a different outfit so that you'd be able to see the lines of the body in a way which I felt like the audience would be able to enjoy it as a visual situation. And yeah.
So I'll just ask about because it's a collaboration. Tooth is two artists that work here. So I'd like to introduce Billy Burke, who composed the score for Tooth on Wednesday night and performed on the night. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you've worked with Nqa in the lead up to the performance and a little bit about perhaps your background and your work as a musician?
Yeah, I mean, my background briefly is painting, drawing kid as well. So I did MFA at COFA.
Okay.
Painting, drawing back in the day.
Were you at COFA at the same time? Or?
I think we
No.
might have missed each other by a year.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I sort of come from a background of music as well, music and being in bands and performing a lot. So with this project, Nqa and I have worked on a few projects recently. On Airspace, we had a show where I did painting and sound-based work,
Okay.
installation work. Before that, we worked as part of a collective called Ulterior Noises, which was live performance, installation, noise works, and also contributed to some work at First Draft and up in a gallery. There's also quite a few different things.
Yeah.
So there's been quite a build-up of work and collaboration. Nothing as intrinsically linked as this piece. So I guess my process was a lot of it was just getting an understanding of Nqa's, I guess you'd call them drafts. So how the work was developing, and then contributing a sound piece based around using a very old 1970s drum machine was sort of the core. So this very distinct, almost iconic organ drum machine, and then adding layers of keyboards put through varying chorus and echo pedals. So it was a very sort of analog, which kind of reflects on my painting practice, which is less is more. So if I've got a palette of 100 colours, that's problematic. So I'm going to stick to 5 colours. And then I think it's difficult when you're crossing something which is performance-based and music-based. They're very different spheres. So we didn't really talk much about composition linked to...
So were you, sorry to interrupt, I'm just going to get in my head how this works. So you're sitting there developing this work and you're responding within, because just for the audience, Nqa had this set up in her studio, exactly like this. So, which was great because it meant that when she arrived at Draw Space, she was quite confident, although she did measure extensively, but she was quite confident that this was all going to work. So I just want to imagine how this works. So you're composing as you're watching, she's talking to you about how this is feeling, or are you more separate than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's we're talking about drawing, so it was very much sketching. So I'd sketch out, I'd record like a little sequence of sounds, pass it to Nqa, and then Nqa would come back with something or show me something.
But there was a day where we were like, I was like, all right, let's see what you've got. And previously there'd been like conversations, and then when you showed me what you had, I was like, that's gonna work, that's fantastic. Can we make it maybe a bit longer? Can we make it that there's, because I wanted to pace it as a drawing. My drawing style tends to be really enthusiastic, it tends to like be very inspired, it tends to get frantic, it tends to have a lot of uncertainty and doubt. Then I decide not to do it, and then I go and I finish it.
Same as me, actually.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists can relate to that.
And so I think that really was like the trajectory of how you do the sound as well.
Yeah.
And I was saying stuff like, just think about like what it is like when you do drawings.
Yeah, and I was considering like I have some understanding of Nqa's musical interests within the realm of ambient music, which are a little different to my tastes, but they cross over. So I was drawing on that. So in the vein of, and that really helped guide the process, like giving me a couple of songs that inspired me. I was like, okay, well, so it just took refinement, and it was just like, it was kind of like drawing with sound, so in a good way. And it was very, for me, fulfilling to sit on the ground here on Wednesday and let it roll out and play with it.
And did it turn out as you hoped?
Oh yeah, I think it worked well, and the volume was right, and I'm really glad that it was documented as well for reference.
Fantastic. Okay.
There's so many different aspects of drawing going on here. So there's like it's an installation performance as well, and installation's understood as expanded drawing. But I think maybe what I want to explain to maybe some people who are not maybe dancers is that you're often told the language used in dance is there's just so many similarities. Like when you do certain moves, it's like you're told you draw your circle with your foot.
Yep.
You're drawing a circle with your foot, and then what's your lines? They have to be straight lines. And the quality of the line is something that I've thought about a lot, and whether that's to do with movement, the speed, or like the way something's done, but also making like the body expanding and contracting. And I did do drawings of the choreography, because that's also, how do you remember choreography? So I was looking at how a lot of choreographers do it, and it is strange, the drawings that they do. But I had patterns on the floor I wanted to make.
Right.
And I made. And the piece was highly choreographed because I found there were specific movements which I was drawing from different places that were communicating with like the linear supports, which act as formal elements, but also as things that are supporting the body or making it vulnerable.
Yeah, there's that tension.
Exactly. And also the floor, and also the walls.
Right.
And so that's really like the surface that I'm talking about with like having tooth. Also the air. So when you're doing, when you're spinning and you expand your body, that causes you to slow down, which as well changes the quality of the movement. So all of these things come together in a way that, it was just really nice to just be able to focus on those formal elements, while also it being quite a personal work about art making, I suppose. And
would you consider? sorry, the struggle.
Well, just I think I like it in artworks when you can see that it maybe there was effort required. Like it doesn't all have to look easy. Like I think people can relate to artworks where there's the trace of the human in it, and often that does come from mistakes or through force. You can see that there's different pressures.
Yep. I agree with that. Mistakes are often the best teachers.
Yes. And there was there was a mistake I made, which I find quite poetic when I've thought about why it happened in the performance. And it was something I might demonstrate how it was supposed to go and how it went. Because as I said, in the sort of way it was structured, there was like the frantic, it was in the frantic section.
Yeah.
And I entered the pole a little bit enthusiastically, which meant that I was spinning too fast. And because I was spinning too fast, I was unable to get my legs through a gap in my hands and that would have taken me to my next move. And so I tried twice, and I realised that I was going too fast and there was risk involved, and the audience, I think, could feel that risk as well. And so I had to do something else, and I just pulled through into a different position, which was also, I found, quite beautiful. And to do that in real time, and for people to see, oh, there's something happening there, something's not working, like, is she going to be okay? But also to, like, as an artist, be able to, like, move through that and continue. I found that piece, that section, actually, I quite liked. And I noticed that was the part that went on the Instagram. I was like, oh, I didn't have to hide that.
No.
things when you're drawing develop that maybe aren't in the way you expect, but it's about making that work and having the confidence as well to not erase it, but to allow that to be part of the work.
Yeah. Yes, couldn't agree more.
And often when you're a bit enthusiastic, that sort of thing happens.
Yeah, of course. And, you know, there's always a degree of nerves, I imagine.
Yeah. Especially with a piece which you're like, you're nearly finished, you don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so I wondered if anybody else has got any sort of particular questions. I mean, I think I'm interested in where to next. I'm interested in, actually, before we move on, I wanted to ask you about the have you thought about potentially exhibiting the drawings that constitute the development of the choreography? Because, I mean, I would, you know, within this space, you know, it would be possible to include those as, you know, telling the sort of bigger story of the work. So it's a thought. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, you're the artist and it's up to you, but I would have thought that was a possibility as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting how many different drawings sort of went into it, like the amount of drawings I did for this
design,
situation here.
Developing this structure.
And like my dad's an engineer, and he says, well, in, you know, the olden days before it was all online, he'd do sometimes 10,000 drawings for like projects. And yeah, it would be interesting to get a curatorial eye on all of the drawings that have developed in the lead up to this.
I just found some in the studio. I was setting the studio back up yesterday, and I just like pulled out this whole page, orange piece of paper with these lines with times next to it.
So that would be, you know, quite a, I mean, I would be interested to see those and to think of those, you know, as part of the documentation that accompanies this work. You know, if you wanted to sort of potentially photograph them and just include them, you know, in the documentation that goes online, you know, that would be a possibility. Up to you.
That's really nice, because part of some of the feedback I've gotten, and maybe some of my dreams, are like always just thinking bigger, you know, for the next one. And I think that I do have some real physical barriers to going much bigger. One of them being I do like to have like my body making all of this as much as I can, and if it goes much bigger, I don't know if I can handle that. You know, like there's only so much my body can take, especially when there's going to be a performance on the other end of it. But also with spaces, I just really think that it's beautiful to have this read in terms of draw space as a drawing, and the cultural connotations that go with pole are not always ones that are really going to add to the ideas that I'm asking for. Like, I would love the audience to see me as, you know, abstracted forms and shapes. And if in some environments it's just not going to be read as that, like even just like exercising in the park. I like to go to the park and do my sort of like flexibility exercises. And you know, often you know, men will come up and move me off. I'm not using those bars correctly and show me how it's done with the, you know, the pull-ups or whatever. And to have the space where I feel comfortable being able to explore movement in this way, it was really nice to have it in my studio, because in the pole studio, it's not maybe as welcome there, and so it's hard to get the right context for this sort of expression.
I think a lot's got to do with how you frame and describe it yourself.
That's true.
You know, I think that's really about, that's your right as an artist to sort of articulate what it is that your work is about. And you know, that's, and I mean, you did that well, but you didn't specifically address that concern in the written information. So I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. You know, so that you just keep people focused on how they, on the sort of biases that they're bringing to your performances, and you know, just
in this statement though, I don't mention scaffolding or pole. All I say is linear
structures,
linear elements.
And you know, this idea of resistance.
Yes.
I particularly recall.
Which I like, and I do think, you know, creative resistance is always the most inspiring when you see it done, and it is something which I think of maybe more symbolically here. I also really like how this space is one room. I like how that you don't go through like a wall. You don't have to peek inside. It's really open. The only other space I can think of is actually the gallery one at Airspace. That is a bit similar, because it's got that same sort of view, which is just a really beautiful space to work with. So part of me does wonder if it had been flipped around the other way, and the audience was on this side and then the scaffolding in the windows.
Okay. So you were closer to the window. Okay.
That'd be interesting. And I'm interested in exploring performance more, and I do see it as necessarily part of my art making practice, because even the small assemblages I make, it's all quite hard on my body. I get a lot of stress in my shoulders, and this sort of movement is really helpful to me.
Okay. It's therapeutic.
Yes, in a way.
Okay. Yes. Fantastic. So is there anything else you wanted to say about it? I'm totally happy if you want to, what we'll do is we'll just sort of cut the video and go over there and film a little bit. If you want to talk a little bit about that.
I do. I think I would like to talk about maybe some of the movements and just give some quick demonstrations.
Sure.
But yeah, so you put chalk on your hands first of all, which is obviously the drawing material, because this helps you grip the pole. And so the first thing I want to show is the way that the movement of the body, whether it's expanded or contracted, maybe a bit further away, sort of speeds up or slows it down. So, I'm going to go full outfit. So you do a climb. Oh, I'm going too fast. So this is slowing me down. This move is called the vomitron because it makes you go so fast. So then you can compare it to a bit like that, which makes you go slower. Did you see the differences in speed? Yeah. And so the issue I had on the night was I was really enjoying doing my leg circles here and using the whole body as movement. And go to one of my other favourite parts, which is a big lick. But then I just went straight up the pole. It was so fast. If I were going slowly,
So was that was what you intended doing?
that was the situation.
Ah, okay. I see.
Then it takes you
Ah, okay.
here to there.
Okay.
So I found that, just in terms of like when you're drawing, whether you do a hard stroke or whether you're doing it lightly, you know, it shows if you cause problems in your work, and I just felt that idea of force is very relevant in this project. And in terms of the scaffolding, an issue I had as well was in terms of curbing my enthusiasm was I set this up to be relevant to my body. It's this is at hip height, so then I'm able to make lines like that. But there are parts of the scaffolding that stick out of it. So it's both supporting my body and it's making it vulnerable. Very much an ankle squat. So that's as well something I found interesting, how this idea of things that support you can also, put you in danger as well, which is also definitely how I see life. And what else I want to show? Being able to work with the horizontal was really interesting, and from the dancers I knew who came, they said that was what was very interesting, because you can do similar moves on the pole, but with the horizontal. So that's a really nice thing as well in terms of being able to work with it. Oh yes, so in terms of the floor work, there's resistance on the floor too. That's why I'm wearing socks. So socks you'd never wear on a pole because they're sliding. But I wanted to be able to do fish flops and stuff, which you need to be able to have some slidiness on the floor, and these stick. So there's throughout all the movements I was doing, there's this negotiation of whether I'm going to be able to move on the surface or whether I'm going to get stuck. So that was definitely something going through my mind.
It's interesting how important the barrier between the body and the knees.
Yes. Yes, and your skin, it doesn't allow sliding. Yeah. And it is an interesting way to look at the gallery. I remember coming into Melinda and being like, can I just do a quick carver? Just a quick forward roll, and what does the floor feel like? And I was able to use the socks as well to be able to slide into positions, because I wanted there to be fluidity as well as uncertainty, because it's only when there's dynamics happening that is interesting. I'll just show you my favourite move, because you can't hear that as well. So, as well, a lot of the things I'm doing on the pole have names, and this one I like, it's called Butterfly, and I like how it has straight parts of it, but there's a lot of moves which involve splits, which I think look to sort of like a person doing splits, and I think this one is quite beautiful for looking like a shape. Too fast. What keeps you up on the pole is pushing down and pulling, and it's these oppositional forces that are also compositional devices in a way. And so I also don't know how much that comes through to people who don't maybe do those activities, but I think there's something I found really therapeutic knowing that it's that tension that keeps you up. It creates pretty shapes.
That and a lot of upper body strength, I'm thinking.
Yes. There we go.
Okay.
Is that useful?